Well, all good things must come to an end. And the Western Empire, the Western Roman Empire, ended in AD 476 or CE 476. And there really wasn't much to protect the Western Empire. It was with the exception of the Alps and to a much lesser degree the Pyrenees, there are no real good natural defenses for the Western Empire. Um, so that it fell under the pressure of the Germans, the barbarians, is not terribly surprising. Um, the Eastern Empire, however, which we call the Byzantine Empire, is really quite different. It has the Black Sea here. It has a whole bunch of mountains, and not very pleasant mountains, in here. Desert here. Desert here. There's a small entranceway right here, and it does. There are regular invasions in here, but nothing at all like the Romans saw in the West. The capital, Constantinople, is right here, and it's got water on three sides. Plus, it's got big, thick, I mean, really thick walls in between around the city entirely, and particularly on the land side. So it's built to survive, and it's the only political unit that I know that lasted for 1,000 years. I suppose someone could argue that the Egyptian dynasties lasted that long in the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good selling point or not. Um, the maximum emperor for the Eastern Empire in its early days was a fellow by the name of Justinian in the early and mid 500s. Now, if you take a look right here, here's clergy, here's the Senate or senators, here's the army, and of course, Justinian is in charge of all of these, but he's more than just in charge. He's a spiritual leader with very practical powers in a way that we don't see spiritual leaders these days. And of course, you notice that his robe is quite a bit different. You may also notice these slippers here. Those could only be worn by the emperor. But most important for us is this thing around his head. It looks like a halo. It's actually called a nimbus, Nimbus, and it indicates that someone is saturated with holiness, or someone is cloaked in holiness, or whatever you want to say. But certainly, as the person who should be in charge, um, it's signified by this nimbus, and the leadership of the Byzantine emperor is symbolized by that nimbus more than anything else. By the way, right here on this shield is what's called the Chi-Rho, and this happens to be the symbol of Christ in those days, or Jesus in those days. And it In the beginning, Jesus was symbolized by the fish or by the cross. The fish has kind of gone out of the way at this point, and now it's the Chi-Rho, which dates back to the early 300s, and of course the cross. So, but Justinian, starting with this core region of the empire here, expanded the empire back into much of the Western Empire. Might have gone further if something hadn't gotten in the way. Recaptures Italy, captures the islands, captures a little piece of Spain here, recaptures most of North Africa. So Justinian is really, it just creates, he doubles the size of the empire. So it's a very powerful empire. And then something happens. The Bubonic Plague hits the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire, people of the Byzantine Empire had no inborn resistance to the plague. And Justinian appoints this guy by the name of Theodore to essentially be the chief gravedigger for Constantinople. And Procopius, the historian, wrote, Theodore made very large pits, inside of which 70,000 corpses were laid down. He thus appointed men there who brought down corpses, sorted them, and piled them up. They pressed them in rows on top of each other in the same way as someone presses hay in a loft. Men and women were trodden down, and in the little space between them, the young and infants were pressed down, trodden with their feet, and trampled down like spoiled grapes. That's pretty blunt and pretty graphic. And there's no reason to believe that this isn't what happened. Now, since Procopius was talking about 3 pits, that would seem to yield 210,000 corpses. Did people die so fast in Constantinople, which is where this is at, that you needed these many pits? You end up with 210,000 corpses. I think that's a stretch. Did a lot of people die though? Thousands and tens of thousands of people died, and there's no question that they did, and they died quickly and terribly in many instances. But I think it's legitimate to ask where did the plague come from? And the answer is it almost certainly came from this region in here, in the shadow of the Himalayas. There are groundhog-like animals in this section. They have burrows, and the bubonic plague gets loose in these burrows, and the groundhogs actually adapt to it. They're not happy about it, of course. Groundhogs have fleas. Fleas get on black rats. They don't get on brown rats. They get on black rats, and then work their way down here. And of course, then there's commerce between India and the Eastern Empire. They're not that far apart. And so, the bubonic plague kills black rats just like it kills us. Well, let's say you start off with 400 black rats on a ship. And by the time you get over to the Eastern Empire, you've got 100 left. And each one of those 100 has 10 fleas. That's 1,000 fleas who then jump on humans, on horses, on dogs, on whatever. And now you have a first class and a very vicious disease loose among a virgin population. Where did the bubonic plague come from? Good question. The disease environment in India, of course, is insane. But there's good reason to believe that bubonic plague actually began down in Central Africa, was taken again by fleas here, and then the fleas transferred them to groundhogs. Time passes, the groundhogs transfer the fleas back, and that's how essentially you get that seems to be the trail which the bubonic plague followed. But it had an impact which was quite unexpected. Byzantium lost so many people that its armies, although they were first-class armies, and they do an extraordinary, they fought some extraordinary wars since the plague, particularly against the Persians. Nevertheless, the army does not have a lot of backup. I mean, they just don't have enough people to have a large number of resources. And down in this section here, where the black rat doesn't go, Saudi Arabia, or the Arabian Peninsula, which is mostly desert, the Islam has been born. Good founding date for Islam is 610. So about less than half a century later, the Muslim armies are going to burst out of this region, and at the Battle of Yarmouk, defeat a major Byzantine army. And there's nothing the Byzantines can do about it. They just don't have the resources. The Muslim army sweeps south like this, past Jerusalem and into what is today Egypt, and then along the North Africa coast. So in the blink of an eye, the lower half of the Mediterranean becomes Islamic. And that, of course, means that you are going to have a whole society, that a whole worldview, one of the major religions of the world, is going to have its birth, at least in part, thanks to some fleas sitting on some rats entering the Eastern Empire. That changes the whole idea of spirituality in the world. These things happen. This is how history works. So everybody out there, take care, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll see each other again someday. Bye-bye.